good whenever you are.
All right, good evening. My name is John Clark. I am Vice President of the Kendall ISD School Board. Our President, John Hunt, was injured today and will be out for this meeting, so I'll be acting as the presiding officer. I call this meeting of the Kendall Independent School District to order. First off, let's go through the roll call. Andrew Biscoe.
Here.
Sean Ham.
Here.
Leslie Carruthers.
Here.
Julie Walker.
Julie Webb here.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right.
Michael Strange.
Here.
John Clark. I'm used to the old way, Julie. On March 16, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meetings to the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to coronavirus COVID-19. In accordance with those suspended rules, we certify that the notice of the meeting was posted online for at least 72 hours prior to this meeting. Although all members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference or telephone call. We are meeting by use of Zoom video conferencing, which allows for two-way communication between the board. As we would in any in-person meeting, members of the public who have followed instructions on meeting notice for registering to speak during the public comment portion will have their comments read in the comments portion of the posted agenda. All of the meeting procedures will adhere to board adopted procedures to the extent practicable. An audio recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. We apologize in advance for any unforeseen difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. And so we've already done roll call. That brings us to item 3, public comment on agenda items.
There were no public comments on this meeting.
All right, then we will move on to general public comments. Were there any general public comments?
There were not.
All right, then number 5, the consent agenda. All items listed under the subheading will be adopted with one motion unless they're removed from the consent agenda by a trustee for discussion. If you have any questions regarding these items, let's talk about them now. Otherwise, I'll ask, does anyone want to remove any items from the consent agenda?
Yeah, I had a few, the Region 11 contract, and then I just need a little more clarification on new hires and resignations.
Okay, so under, I guess that's section F. Is that what you're talking about, or later on? Because that's the only interruptible.
Yeah, section F, the benefits co-op.
We are required by law to provide benefits to employees. That's part of our standard practices of employment. We're part of a co-op through Region 11 with other school districts, which gives us a benefits, I guess, cooperative more buying power to negotiate. The co-op costs us no money. So I don't, I think I texted that or emailed that to you earlier today. So.
Yeah, I did get an email from him, but I didn't see, it may just because it was on my phone, I didn't see any response to it. That was my biggest question. Well, 2 of them. 1, what's the cost? So that's good. And then 2, I do worry just with my own dealings with Region 11, like what are they going to offer virtually for our employees that don't want to go to that location, if there's going to be any summer offerings virtually for our teachers.
So I think are you talking about trainings? Because
Right.
This is benefits. This has nothing to do with trainings. This is all about the benefits, their employee benefit packages. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, is there any further discussion on any items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion with regard to the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve all items on the consent agenda as presented.
That's a motion by Mr. Ham,
Second.
second by Mr. Biscoe. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll go through roll call. Andrew Biscoe,
Yes.
Sean Ham,
Yes.
Leslie Carruthers,
Leslie.
Leslie.
Yes.
All right, sorry. Julie Webb,
Yes.
Michael Strange,
Yes.
And John Clark votes yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. And then we'll move down to item 6A. No, we're going to move item 6A to the end of the meeting since there may be executive session on that, which will cover everything. I guess, do you want to move everything, including items in number 3 in that section, Mr. G?
I think we can just move it all if we want to. That'd probably be the easiest thing to do.
Anyone have any objection?
No.
Chair, here's none. We'll move that item to the end. So that moves to item B, discuss and possible approval of rescinding premium pay for non-exempt employees. Mr. G?
Okay, we had previously passed the resolution whenever COVID-19 came out and everything was getting shut down to offer premium pay for our employees. Now that the governor has started opening things up, we want to come off the premium pay and now be able to bring our office staff at the campuses back onto the campuses to be able to help the summer with the principals and get ready for the next school year. So, and bring back our custodial groups as well. So those are, the resolution was approved by or sent by our recommended, so the word I'm looking for, recommended by our attorneys to basically come off of that. So.
Is there any discussion with regard to this resolution? I don't see anyone right. Andrew, you have something?
No.
Michael? All right. And I hearing no need for further discussion, I'll entertain a motion with regard to the premium pay for non-exempt employees, resolution rescinding that.
Make a motion to approve the resolution as presented, rescinding the premium pay for non-exempt employees who were required to work on site during the emergency closure for COVID-19.
Motion by Mr. Ham,
Second.
second by Ms. Carruthers. Is there any further discussion? Then we'll go through the roll call vote. I'll go backwards this time. Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Yes.
Ms. Carruthers,
Yes.
Mr. Ham,
Yes.
Mr. Bisco,
Yes.
and Mr. Clark votes yes. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item C, discuss and possible approval of roofing contractor. Mr. G, who will present on this?
Ms. Mode will present.
Oh, okay. That's fine. I have it all here in front of me. We did open our proposals on Tuesday. Unfortunately, we only had 3 roofers that actually showed for the pre-bid, which means that we only had 2 that actually submitted bids. After looking at everything from these 2 roofing companies, both are good roofing companies, but K-Post was almost $500,000 less than AAE. So the team that evaluated the proposals are recommending K-Post to do all 3 roofs, and we're hoping to start on June 1st upon your approval. Does anyone have questions?
Questions, anyone? Okay, my initial question is, are we comfortable with just three people putting in bids, which seems real unusual with the workforce and work situation? Number one, because it gives you a small pool. 2, it doesn't give you a real good comparison as to whether or not, as between 1 or 2, if one's $500,000 off the price, you know, if you had 4 or 5 bids, you know, I am a little concerned that you have one bidder that much lower. That's a lot.
The one that K-Post that we went with was actually right on with the numbers of the roofing consultant that we hired with their estimates. Speaking with the roofing consultant of why there were only 2, there were 3, but one of them was more of a metal roof kind of company, and they did. I think when they saw the specs, they pulled out. The other thing was that the other company hasn't done a whole lot of business with school districts, but K-Post has. K-Post is also, you know, both companies have good reputations. That was the thing that we were looking at, but the cost factor was a big one, and then timeline, being able to get the job, you know, done in a the timeframe that we need it to be completed. But as far as what the roofing consultant said was that right now is when roofs are being done, and a lot of companies are already inundated with business, and they didn't want to overextend themselves, so, and couldn't meet deadlines. So that's, I guess, part of the market right now. So,
Well, again, the only thing I saw odd about Capo's bid is they bid a number $500,000 lower and then said, oh, we'll add double our workforce, which in theory would have been outside their bid normally, wouldn't it? Because you came back and said there's more time within the timeframes, they'll double their planned workforce on those projects.
I'm sorry, Jim.
The original agreement, I mean, their proposal was a 90-day, and they can double up their workers and cut it down to 60 days.
So are we asking for that to be done in the 60-day window? Is that the plan?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's the plan.
Just
That's the
90
agreed
days will be
price.
pushing us. 90 days will be pushing us right to the beginning, or right at school already starting. Of course, the last month of the project, Delaney is the big project, and that's the one that will be that they propose for 90 days. We're going to ask them to sit there and bring that down to a shorter period of time and get it in scope with the other jobs. But the work that would be completed would not be stuff that would put children in danger. The work that would be finished work, basically, that just, so they didn't see an issue with the 90 days in reality. So,
Okay.
but we are going to ask them to get it done within the scope of the other jobs.
One of the things we're hoping for with the timelines, because that was part of the proposal, the CIA building, they had put in for 25 days. So barring, we all need to be praying for no rain, because all three of these jobs will be running concurrently, and we don't need it. It can rain through June 1st, but after June 1st, we need to be dry. But CIA, since it is the smallest roof of the three roofs, they're saying they can have that done in 25 calendar days. So that puts us about mid-July to hopefully get that staff back in. And Delaney, because of the way that roof is, was a little bit longer, and Arthur was 60 days, but they had put 90 on Delaney, and we've asked them, or we'll be asking them, because we had to wait on approval first, but it is a proposal and we can negotiate those days with them. But they did put in their bid that they would work with us with crews to get that done if we needed it done, and we need it done.
And John, what I see possibly happening is that they finish the CIA building and that crew moves over to help with the other,
Yeah.
you know. And so that's when they're saying double it up, is probably just move one crew from that one job that's completed to the other job to help out.
So how's this dovetailing with the tear down of the pre-K building?
I didn't hear you very well. Say again.
How is this dovetailing with the tear down of the pre-K? Are we going to put a new roof on CIA and tear down pre-K later?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Then I will entertain a motion with regard to accepting a roofing contractor to complete the roofing projects in all three buildings.
Do we need a separate motion for each project?
I think they're saying yes, just put their name in for each one of those
Okay,
contractor each time, so it's three separate statements.
okay. I make a motion to approve K-Post as the roofing contractor to complete the roofing project at the CIA building and gym.
Motion by
Well,
Mr. I think we can probably, since they're all the same contractor, we can do it all in one motion unless someone objects and might have objection to one contractor on one roof. I don't think that, so you just do them all together.
Let me restate my motion then. I make a motion to approve K-Post as the roofing contractor to complete the roofing project at the CIA building and the gym and at Delaney Elementary and at James Arthur Intermediate.
Second motion.
By Mr. Ham. It was a second by you, Andrew.
Yes.
Motion by Ham, second by Mr. Bisco. Any further discussion? If not, I'll do the roll call. Leslie Carruthers,
Yes.
Julie Webb. Geez, Julie, I'm tearing up that one. Julie Webb,
It's all right. Yes.
Michael Strange,
Yes.
Andrew Bisco,
Yes.
Sean Ham,
Yes.
John Clark, yes. That motion passes unanimously. Now we go down to the budget amendment for the roofing projects. Mr. G, who's presenting?
Mr. Adams, I mean,
Well, I just added up the three proposals. It's gonna have to come out of fund balance currently. And like I've said in the past, I mean, if we get into a bind as far as cash wise, we can always go and secure some financing and spread out the cost over a number of years if we needed to. But right now, we've got basically $2.5 million in fund balance that's designated for construction. So the other $500,000, we can afford to take it out of fund balance if we needed to.
Do you know what the fund balance will be with that withdrawal about approximately?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
and we just received notification today that there's another court hearing on June 11th. So we're scheduled for another court hearing on June 11th with the litigation on the court, on the roofs. So
Maybe.
maybe, yeah.
I have yet to have an
Mr. G,
in-person
Neither
hearing.
of you have any reservations about the fund balance? You guys are okay with this?
You know, the reality is the money was set aside before Mr. Adams and I came in here to take care of the roofs, the 2.5 million. That money had already been designated and put aside. I feel comfortable that we're getting very close to that number, and we're getting 3 roofs taken care of. That I don't know how much money previously that would have taken, how many roofs that would have taken care of previously, but I think we got a good plan to get 3 roofs fixed before we start school. And I think that's a big thing. And as far as our being able to, we have a healthy fund balance, and being able to take some of that out of the fund balance, I think we're in good shape. So.
The only reason I ask, I think the financial statements show that, the investment portfolio, I think the number was like 20 million. When you look at the totals, and we've kind of been operating at a $24 million number. So again, I don't think there's been that much loss in the investment pool, but maybe some, but that's why I asked Jimmy if he knew the number.
Okay.
Just off the
It's
top
gonna
of
be
his head.
right at $10 million after,
Say it again,
be right at 10 million.
fund balance?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Now you're saying 24 million and 20 million as far as the investments.
I was just looking, that's what I thought I read in the investment report, and maybe I read it maybe I doubled the number when I read it.
Well, right now we have all of our tax money in the investment report. We've collected, 95% of our tax money. Now we're spending it.
Okay,
I had to transfer $1 million out today to make payroll tomorrow.
okay. And that's maybe why I saw the number higher.
Right.
Is there any further discussion with regard to the requested budget amendment? Hear none, then I'll entertain a motion with regard to the budget amendment for the 521 roof replacement.
I make a motion to adopt the 2019-2020 budget amendment for roofing projects in district as presented.
Motion by Mr. Ham,
Second.
second by Mr. Bisco. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go through the roll call. Mr. Bisco,
Yes.
Mr. Ham,
Yes.
Ms. Carruthers,
yes,
Ms. Webb,
yes,
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
and John Clark votes yes. Those motions passed unanimously. Now we move to the budget amendment, the E-rate project cost.
And this is basically the E-rate funding that we had talked about previously. We will get 60% reimbursement on the E-rate, but we are going to have to sit there and come up with a budget amendment to take care of the project in the first place before we can get reimbursed. So.
Not
Question.
100% sure that it's going to happen in this fiscal year. Some of it may be in this fiscal year and some may be in next fiscal year, but I just went ahead and did the whole thing because I don't know. It could be done by August 31st, but
Everything's pushed back right now because of with the E-rate So right, what we were hoping to get started in July is probably going to get started more at the beginning of the school year.
Is there anything else to present on that, Brian? Are we good?
No, that's pretty much it. And they're absolutely right. We don't know for sure on the schedule. We're anticipating maybe we just don't know. We could be funded in July just like normal, or it may be August, or it may be even September. We just don't know.
Is there any further questions? Any other issues?
I
If
don't
not,
know.
I'll-
I don't know if this is really a question. I put this in the email. I noticed at least with the E-rate proposal is mostly infrastructure. It makes me wonder now with all the virtual learning and knowing that eventually, right, we're probably going to be in this situation again. If there's opportunity to either with this funding or like we're using, 60% or 40% rather, fund balance to cover that cost if we use that. For teachers, like I think there's trainings, software programs, things that, 3-4 months ago, we didn't even think was a need, and now would definitely be one. So it just makes me wonder, if there's opportunity to use those funds to help teachers directly outside of the infrastructure.
You cannot use E-rate funding for anything but the infrastructure. So it would all be district funds that would be expended towards that. And we have plans that Dr. Vu and Mr. Franklin have been working on as far as softwares and all that stuff. One of the things we know that there's need for PD for teachers. We've talked about that. Dr. Vu is developing a professional development calendar that will go out next week. We have our alignment within our systems that we have to make sure that we have that needs to get better. And then one is consistency with what we're bringing into the district as far as our curriculum and our software. And, right now it's kind of been all over the place, and we're going to be much more consistent in what we're putting out and what we're utilizing in the classrooms. And that's one thing that Dr. Vu and her staff and Mr. Franklin and his staffs have been working on diligently ever since I've got, they've come on board, and ever since I've came on board, it's analyzing what we have and working towards alignment. But as far as just going out and buying things just to buy them, I don't see the need to do that. I think we need to be very diligent in what we're doing and very purposeful in what we're doing. So, and that's what we've been moving forward, and the presentations that we've had with curriculum and everything else, as far as our 5-year strategic planning, all those were addressed in that. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'll clarify. My wondering is with the E-rate, we had kind of what we thought we would get and realized, well, we're going to have to use 40% of our fund balance rather, to add that cost. I think we're in the same situation now with the virtual where, okay, we set a budget last year, thinking this is what we'll need. And now we're going to this year realizing, man, we might need more. So, it just makes me wonder if that fund balance would be available for this extra stuff that we might need to get teachers once that is determined what they need. In other words, that, we set aside a budget specific to software and to curriculum and stuff previous, but now we're in a different world, right? So it makes me wonder if there's that opportunity later on, if we need more, that funding will be available.
I think you just budget for it in the next fiscal year.
What I heard him say, I think is once we figure out what the need is, then we probably have to look and say, okay, here's how much we're going to have to spend to accomplish that need. I'm not sure anybody knows the true need or true direction that we'll operate in September. I mean, I've heard, some of the things that I've heard are just unbelievable, desks 6 feet apart, half the kids in classroom, half the kids at home, one day at home. Who knows what we're going to end up with. I also just got that notice, I guess you all did too, that governor's calling for 5% cuts in budgets in all agencies, which TEA will probably figure a way to pass that down and cut what comes to us somehow, some way. So, there's going to be
The conversation, we just found out today with the commissioners talk that exactly what you and I had the conversation about the other day was that the state's going to cut back their funding from us for what the feds gave us through the CARES Act. So that money is now going to be diminished from our state budgets the federal government gave us, what is it, 240 million? No, 240,000, sorry, 2 million. I wish it did, but 240,000. But yeah, we're going to have to justify all that with the whole COVID-19 component. And like I said, it's not a good thing for school districts. So whenever they said that there's all this money through House Bill 3 and all this stuff, now the state is definitely restricting things a lot more. And the money that the federal government sent is now being used to offset losses by the state. So, and which is exactly what I told you we were predicting they were going to do. And sure
Only
enough.
because we have a funding arm. I mean, like the city of Kendall got like $300,000-$400,000, but they don't have anybody over them. They just have to justify it and they get to spend it and return what they don't spend. I realize that because of the state funding model, they're going to find a way to recoup their loss. And that's exactly what they're going to do. You're right.
Yes.
But that's another issue. I think that comes in once we figure out what it is. I mean, I think your question is, can we use fund balance for those extra needs for teachers? I think that's the question you're asking.
Well, like to Sean's point, he said we could put it in the budget, but that doesn't really go into effect till September. If we wait to train teachers and give them all those things in September, we wasted the whole summer, right? So I'm just saying, if there's an opportunity, if Dr. Vu, Mr. G sees that opportunity, it makes me wonder if we can let them use those funds, because we need them. I mean, teachers need to be trained in July and August, not, September is way too late.
They still would have to come back to us with the proposal, whatever they're going to use it for. We'd still have to approve, what they're going to use it for during the summer. And if they don't have that planned out as of yet, we can't write a blank check and say, yeah, just take out whatever you need later, whenever you see it.
Yeah, well, and that's why I was saying this under the E-rate, which was, we expected more, I guess, in the E-rate. It wasn't there. So we're using the fund balance to support the infrastructure. Just makes me wonder, just a wondering, like, that's an opportunity.
And I think I'm misunderstanding. You said we were expecting more out of the E-rate. We always knew that we were only going to get 60%. And I think in Mr. Franklin's presentations and stuff, we were always going to only have 60% because it's based off of our
Free and reduced lunch.
free and reduced lunch numbers. So we've known all along what that number has been. The numbers haven't changed. So, I guess I'm not following with where you're going with that one, because we've always known that we were going to have to come up with the other 40% on the E-rate.
Right.
It's like a matching grant. They give you money, but you got to put money in to match your part.
Right. Yeah, and just to remind one more thing about E-rate this year, they changed the rules. So we have not spent any E-rate money for the last 6 years, I believe it is. So we have a balance in there of $600,000 total. Well, that's our total budget. So what the rest of that we're if we don't spend it this year, we lose it. We absolutely do, because they're changing the rules, and next year it starts over at zero, but our funding gets renewed again. So for the next 5-year cycle, we start over again at a little over $500,000 budget. But this year, definitely, if we don't use that, we lose a lot of money.
And all that was mapped out in that 5-year strategic planning that we did when we had all the presentations and the special meeting to go through what we were looking at with the infrastructure, with our curriculum, all of those things. So this was part of that infrastructure plan.
Does that answer your questions, Mr. Strange?
Yeah, I just, it was just a wondering to know that we're just kind of in this situation where we know things have to happen quickly for our teachers. And I know that we're releasing funds for the E-rate. And so it was a wondering and being able to do the same thing for curriculum for teachers.
All right. Then does anyone else have any other discussion with regard to this item? Then I'll entertain a motion with regard to the adoption of the budget amendment for the E-rate funding project costs.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the 2019-2020 budget amendment for the final E-rate funding project cost as presented.
Motion by Mr. Biscoe,
Second.
second by Mr. Ham. Any further discussion on this item? Then we'll take the vote. Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Yes.
Ms. Carruthers,
Yes.
Mr. Ham,
Yes.
Mr. Biscoe,
Yes.
And John Clark votes yes. That motion passes unanimously. We are now to the superintendent's report.
Okay, we'll start off with Dr. Vu with the grading GPA calculation survey that was resubmitted or sent out. So I'll let her pick up with that.
Hi. I have shared some information with you via the board packet. We brought interim grading guidelines to you that were approved. And since that time, we have heard from a small group of students who would like you to reconsider including the third 9 weeks in the overall GPA calculations. In the document that I shared with you, I went through and I outlined the points that I presented to you at the same meeting that we that you all approved the interim grading guidelines. And so the most important part of the argument from the students is that we were still in school in the third 9 weeks, and therefore they would like it to be included in their overall GPA calculations. So with that, I'll take questions, comments. Really, this is, I'm presenting this to you. I'm giving you the data. In our first survey that we took, this was such a small piece of our overall decision-making process that when this was brought to us, we realized that we needed some more data before we made a decision. And so we have, we gave another survey. In this particular case, we limit it only to students who are in high school courses because those are the students whose GPA impacts them long-term. And I presented those results for you here. So what questions do you have, or what kinds of things would you like to know about?
I'm trying to understand how that relates to the actual policy. If I read the policy right, it says the semester 2 average will be determined by the average of the third 9-week grade and the higher of the third or fourth 9-week grade. So explain to me how these students are adversely affected given that policy.
Sure. So I think in this particular case, it's important to distinguish between the semester average that's used to award course credit and the GPA calculations. So we distinguish those two in the grading policy. It's actually on the last page of the current policy that talks about GPA calculations. So what we were talking about is if a student, for example, in an English 1 course, they get credit for the first semester and the second semester. And to get credit for the entire course, they have to have an average of a 70 for the entire semester. So in that particular case, the grades are used to award credit. That's separate from the grades that are used in GPA calculations. The GPA calculations are specific to class rank, which is unique to high school students and is used for all kinds of things, including the award of valedictorian and salutatorian and scholarships and admission to colleges and being the top 10% of a class.
So no one knew there's a problem in the third 9 weeks, right? I mean, we did.
Right. Yeah. They were in school and the third 9 weeks ended and we had spring break, and then over spring break, we realized that the world was changing. Yeah. And so that's what happened.
And so these students want to use at least those grades earned in the third 9 weeks toward their GPA computation. Is that what they're saying?
Yes. And the grading task force, now this is gray. As I put in the notes that I gave you, the third 9 weeks would have only been 40% of the overall semester average. And the grading task force determined that because it was such a small number that it felt like it could be problematic for counting it worth an entire semester's worth of grades for the GPA. And so they determined to exclude it, which I'll say is in line with the districts around us. I spoke with Dr. Devlin just to double check on that, did cut it off the semester. We do have an advantage in Kennedale because we're on a 9-week grading system. And so the districts around us who did, they were in the middle of the 6 weeks, and that wasn't the case with us. We did have a clean break. In this particular case, I see both sides. I see the argument for both sides. And so that's where I'm presenting you with the information. And
I would like to say that, Dr. Devlin headed up the task force, and a big issue with the task force was at the time equity for all students, and ensuring that we have equity for all students, and that was one of the things that we were really worried about with the grading, and with the online, everything moving online. We could not ensure equity for all of our students, and how a half a semester average for some students was going to benefit all students, and so that was a big part of the considerations from the task force.
And I'm just trying to get a handle on, what that means to this small group of students. I mean, are they only ones who are likely to move up in their GPA computation because of that 9 week? Or, I can't do the math. I can't figure out how losing that 9 weeks significantly affects their class rank if it's comparative.
yeah, I don't want to get into specifics, but I can paint a hypothetical situation to you. When you get into the top 10, like the top 10 students in a class, there can be a difference of 0.10, a fraction of a point. When I was teaching high school, the difference between valedictorian and salutatorian was 100th of a point. I mean, it's so small. And so just that third 9 weeks counting for an entire semester could be the difference. And usually, a spot or two, but that's why it matters to some students more than others. That the argument is that they were in school and they were working hard, and they would like to have the third 9 week grades included in their GPA calculations.
There's not a perfect decision, though. One way or the other, somebody's going to suffer,
Right.
whether we include them or whether we don't. It's just that there's no way to please everyone.
Right. It's going to affect one way or the other. That's why I said, here's some more data and we're presenting it to you.
I guess my question, or I guess I'm a little confused, is if all of those students, and mostly we're talking here about the top 10, are affected the same way, then how is that really going to keep one from getting a scholarship to a full scholarship when they do top 6%, because they're all the same? But it is going to affect those ones, those other ones. And I realize this top group is the one, that is wanting that, but can you just do that for the top ones? I mean, wouldn't that be crazy to expect our ones to say, oh yeah, if you want it, we will. And if you want it, we won't. And if you don't, I mean, to me, that just seems crazy. But if we're all on the same, if they're all accounted the same, whether we count it or whether we don't, wouldn't it still be the same? I mean, I don't see how that affects whether you're going to get a scholarship.
So it depends on the number of weighted classes that you take. It depends on what the grades are in those classes. So let's just imagine you have a student in I'll just say the number 2 and 3 spot. And there are scholarships attached to being salutatorian and valedictorian that aren't involved in being in the top 10. So if number 3 took more weighted classes and made higher grades in those classes the third 9 weeks than the student in the number 2 spot, then that could be the difference. That could lead to a swap. And this is hypothetically.
But wouldn't that have already been a choice that they had made when they took their classes? I mean, when they went and
It's possible that the class was not available at the time, and you may have taken the class afterwards
And there's
to do something like that. And you got all kind of situations where one point, I was on my game.
when they signed up to take their classes, the pandemic wasn't there, so they had no idea.
right. And then there are some students who they said, I'm not going to take these classes my sophomore year. I'm going to wait until my junior year. And so they, loaded their schedule with weighted courses that they were anticipating would impact their GPA. And then you get to the second semester where you're going to earn some of those extra weighted points, and then we don't count it. So
Yeah, you also could go into extracurricular activities. I'm taking these classes because I know, say, band or football is over with, and the spring semester would be a better time to take them because I'll have more time to do those things. There's all kinds of possibilities. My only issue is we made a decision, and the decision made, it's kind of hard to look at going retro and going back and changing those decisions for a select few. And I understand that there's scholarships and money involved, and rank and prestige involved with all of that. But if I was told this is the situation and these are the rules, and I followed those rules, and then at the end of whatever that situation was, the rules were changed where I could have did something differently. I could have, either studied more or got a higher grade, or didn't do the pass fail and actually took the grade. You start going into, after you making that change of decision after the fact. If I'd have known those things were going to be changed, I could have reacted differently. And that's the only issue I have. I understand these are the top students in the classes, and parents and students alike are trying to achieve a lot of things, and hopefully go on to do great things with either scholarship money or getting into a particular school. But I just don't see the advantage or the necessity of going back and changing what we've already made a decision on, even giving people the opportunity to make a statement on this stuff beforehand. And really no one said anything till after the fact and midway through doing this.
we did in the first survey, and that data is included. We
Yeah.
did have students who indicated that they wanted to include the third 9 weeks. We did have that. So I think that, as Mr. Ham pointed out, there's not a perfect option here. We're choosing between a number of imperfect options in a situation that we didn't anticipate, and we didn't plan for. And we're doing, we're flying the plane while we're building it. And as we've said, we're continually reflecting on our processes and thinking about ways that we can do better. And so with this particular case, I see both sides. I do truly. I see both sides. I understand why the grading task force made the decision that they did. And I understand why the students are asking us to reconsider. And so with that, there have been districts who have gone back and forth and they've changed their policies, and that's problematic in its own way. As you pointed out, that can be hard too.
Would that only, or I guess if you changed it, would you only change it for those that affected positively?
Our data systems do not support that kind of work.
Okay.
There are a number of reasons, but it would require hand calculation for over 800 kids in terms of record keeping and storage. And then what if they say they want to opt in and then next year they decide they want to opt out? I mean, there are too many things. And then in addition to that, the reason we do it is because we're ranking the students in a way. I know a lot of universities are doing that, and that argument has been made. In a way, we're not comparing apples to apples. If you have some students who you're changing the denominator of the mathematical equation. With certain students who have, this many courses versus students who have this many courses, and then you're doing all this by hand. There's just too much room for human error that could negatively impact students. Our data systems don't support that kind of opting in.
And you would have to keep those calculations up for the next 3 years to get this 3 to 4 years.
We have change in personnel. It's just, unfortunately, it's not an option for us. It's either everybody counts third 9 weeks or nobody counts third 9 weeks.
Well, I think it definitely should be an all or nothing. I don't think it should be we're going to do one for one, this for certain people and this for certain people. I mean, I just was thinking, if we're all already under the same thing that the committee got together and decided the first time, then we're all still with the same level playing field. If either everybody does it or nobody does it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I do.
How do, knowing and hearing what you all and where everything is now, Julie and Stephanie, being that y'all have put in so much in this, what do you want to see happen? Or am I putting you too much on the spot? But I mean, y'all are the ones who have heard both sides. Are you thinking now like, oh, I didn't think about that? Or are you thinking, well, that still doesn't change it. We're still sticking to that. I'm sorry, don't get, if you want, just say I don't want to answer. You don't have to give me a politically correct answer, but I mean, y'all are the ones who put the sweat and the tears in. I mean, you worked hard on it, and you know, I don't know.
Yeah, we worked hard on all of it, including putting together the data for this new decision that we're presenting to you. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Devlin, and I know that she's on the call with us, and she may have some ideas or thoughts to share that I haven't shared before.
I think you guys have really covered everything. I will say the task force went back and forth with this. We heard both sides. We knew we were not going to be able to please that decision, no matter what decision that was made. It would potentially help students and it might potentially harm students. And our goal, as Mr. G was saying, was equitable and to provide the least amount of harm. And so the final decision, looking at the student data from the survey, the parent data from the survey, looking at their comments and looking at surrounding districts, just knowing that the cleanest break was at the semester because they all knew that their GPA calculations were going to include those grades is how we came to that decision that we presented to you guys back in April. We definitely wanted these students to feel heard, is why we wanted to collect the second set of data and present it to you guys as well. I understand both sides of the argument. Even in this second survey, there are comments on both sides it because it will really hurt me. I might lose my top 10%, lose my top quartile. Please do move into the top 10%. I could move into the top quartile. So there's both sides of it. And I've listened to parents and students on both of those sides. Whatever you guys want to do with that data, we support.
I concur. I fully support whatever decision you would like to make. There's not a perfect option here, unfortunately. We're living in grayscale. Black and white is not a luxury that we're afforded under these circumstances, and there's not a perfect decision. And that's why it's hard, and that's why we're bringing it to you, and why we had a grading task force to begin with.
So here are my thoughts. As you know, I voted no for the sole purpose of this, a month ago. Here's my thinking. To be honest, I have no skin in the game, right? I don't have a kid in high school. I'm gladly high school's over for me. I don't want to go back, right? None of us here on this call are directed through any of these changes. However, here's my thinking through this. One, the grading policy only came up because of the COVID situation at home learning. That doesn't, to me, that didn't apply here because the third 9 weeks was not affected. Secondly, my biggest reasoning as I went back and forth with this, even last month, was we're taking away something that already happened. Those grades, those teachers, those students, they already did the work. We're taking away that work. Now, that's a little different than the rest of the grading policy, which is if the fourth 9 weeks is better than the third 9 weeks, we'll go over it. That's fine. But in this case, the GPA is totally wiped away for all 9 weeks after the Christmas break. So we're taking something away that already occurred. Now that I realize that there are some other districts around us that are doing that, but to Dr. Vu's point earlier, that's because they're on 6 weeks. So they had a whole long way to go, over 60%, 70% of the semester still to go that wasn't covered. We were halfway through the semester. And then one of the board members said, I can't remember last time, one of the board members said we were changing the rules in the middle of the game, which ultimately was the whole point of the grading policy, right? Changing the rules. But as I thought about that, I came up and I emailed this to Dr. Vu as well. So I apologize, Dr. Vu, you already heard this, but so keeping with the sports analogy, this is essentially what we've done. If you think about it, if we played a football game everyone goes into the game knowing you're going to play 4 quarters, you're going to play to the end of the game. But something happens at the end of the third quarter, the game ends, we can't resume play, then the score just stays right there. Whoever's winning at the end of the third quarter, that's it, you're the winner. It would be crazy if a ref said, we're going to go back to the halftime score and then determine the winner there. So if we're beating Alvarado, which we should, right? Hello. If we're beating Alvarado 21-14 at the end of the third, and the refs say, well, you scored those 14 points in the third quarter. Actually, you were losing 14-7 at halftime. So Alvarado is the winner because we have to go back to the halftime. That, I guess that's my thinking here is whichever way we go, you know where we're at, but we're taking away something that already occurred. So I have no problem stopping the GPA right where the disruption happened. So for us, again, that's a very clean break. No other districts around us had those clean breaks. But that's not what we're doing. Right now, the policy says take it away. So that's, to me, I would like to think about, you know, if we want to revise it next month, we could take action. We obviously don't have to take action right now. Dr. Vu said they had plenty of time to change scores if needed. But something to think about, at least to me, my recommendation is to think about revising it and take action next month to add the third 9 weeks back to the GPA.
Michael, one of the things that you're saying is revising all this. Part of that, and it's one of the things that there's a song that Keith Jackson has, and it says, all it takes is money. So it's going to take money and time to keep up with these grades, to make these things. And like I said, it's either going to be, we'd like to cut it off at one point. We already made the decision on that element. I understand both sides of it. If you've scored those 14 points in the third quarter, you don't want to take them away. And no matter what the referee decides, half the stands are going to be mad at him. I just think it's cleaner to do it this way with what we already have decided on, and knowing that this is the best option that, you know, we could possibly come up with within the limitations and our resources, because there are going to be a number of things that you're going to have to, like I said, you're going to have to keep a separate books for those particular students that you wouldn't, because you're not going to be able to do the average like you normally did, because you don't have those you don't have it automatically calculated that way. But
Dr.
Yep.
Vu, is that true, Dr. Vu? Would the calculations be different for everybody?
No, we're not gonna, we don't have the data systems to support an opt-in policy. It's either we count third 9 weeks for everybody, or we
Okay.
count it for nobody.
Okay. So, but if you told me, you know, that, and I guess if you're saying that those grades are already in the books and there's nothing that can change on it, I could consider it, but it just seems like we've already made a decision. We already made the decision once, and here we are going back and revisiting the decision again. And we're in a position or in a time where all of these decisions can be questioned because of the circumstances that we're in. And it just, it's difficult for both sides. I seriously understand both sides, you know, being able to, you know, move up in rank or move down in rank. One of my kids actually was, you know, moved down out of the top 10%, like the last semester of grading it. But, you know, it wasn't any fault of his. He did the work, but somebody did a little bit better. I don't really feel comfortable going back and changing what we've done. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, I have one more question. Because I do have a kid in high school that this will affect, and not that we're, you know, where we are was where we are, and that's fine. But how let's say a kid failed that third 6 weeks, that third 9 weeks, and they're thinking, I'm going to have the fourth 9 weeks. So how are you I mean, because I'm trying to think of the other end, all the ones who took that survey and who did the second one, they're the top ones. And I know where their thinking is. They are thinking, up there. The ones that are down at the bottom who are struggling, if we count that third 9 weeks and they failed, they didn't get the opportunity. They may have passed the first semester, failed the third 9 weeks, and so it was going to be up to that fourth 9 weeks to decide whether they passed or not, correct?
We're cutting it for that.
So yeah, so in terms of passing the course or earning course credit, our current policy allows them to use their work in the fourth 9 weeks to bring up that average. So in terms of failing the semester, failing the course, that's not what we're asking. But in terms of their GPA, yes, that failing grade would be included in their overall GPA calculations.
So that number is counted in their GPA,
but it doesn't determine course credit if they were able to bring it up with the fourth 9 weeks in their work in Google Classroom.
Right, but it would affect their GPA, and it would negatively affect it, and they didn't have the opportunity. Whereas I realize what they're saying on the other end is, positively, if you did well, but I know there are probably some who failed that, and they didn't get the opportunity to bring it up and to bring that GPA because their parents got on them and said, you better get that up, da, 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 da.
Yeah, this affects every student, but it affects every student differently. And that's why the task force talked about this, quite a bit. And they talked about the different scenarios and how this can play out. And ultimately they decided to go one way. But that's not to say that the other way doesn't have good points and doesn't, impact positively a group of students as well.
I'm like Michael again. The third 9 weeks was kind of in the books. It was already done. The question I have is, in a grade, when is the final GPA for the year computed? It's not computed every day as you go along. It's computed at the end of the year, right? And that's what goes in the books, where they are at the end of the year. COVID affected that fourth quarter. And so we had to make a decision. We made a decision. I recognize the concern, but I'm like Michael. Yeah, they did the work, but the problem is everything is based upon completing the year. Their final GPA isn't final until they finish the year. The year was finished under COVID restrictions. How we balance that out is what we did. So, I think we've talked about it a lot. I guess the only way to move forward on that is, it's not an action item, but I would amongst the trustees ask, does anyone want to make a motion with regard to reopening this issue? Because again, I think you brought it to us for discussion. And then if we're going to do something on it, we have to come back on it. So I think the proper procedure is I'd open the floor if anyone wants to make a motion, and if a second, and we'll act on it then. So is there any trustee who wants to make a motion with regard to reopening the GPA computation or calculation to move it to another time other than in the prior policy?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to consider revising the current grading policy to include the third 9 weeks GPA for the 2019-2020 school year, I guess for next month.
There's a motion by Mr. Strange. Is there a second? The chair hears no second, so that motion dies for lack of a second. So I take it to mean that we leave the policy as it currently is because there was no second on that motion. That moves us on to item B, which is the graduation.
Get unmuted here. Okay. We've looked at one of the things that we were really trying to make happen was to wait and see what the regulations were for in-person graduations. That came out, I believe, May 2nd, I believe is when they finally said, the governor said that it could happen. The requirements from the commissioner were then handed down. That was May 2nd, sorry. I think it was April, whenever he said that they could have in-person graduations. We had scheduled the UTA auditorium again, or gym again, for our graduation. We had scheduled 2 other dates in June and July, thinking that we might by this time actually get to have them indoors. But the requirements for the graduation require for them to be in person, have to be outdoors. So we had to find another venue. We looked at the possibility of Wildcat Stadium, but we were going to be pushing the social distancing guidelines with 5 tickets, which is another guideline. You can only have 5 tickets per student. So five family members would be in attendance, and trying to social distance that in our stadium was going to be very tough to do so. So we looked at a bigger venue. We looked at Mansfield. Mansfield was very hefty price tag to sit there and rent one of their 2 stadiums. So that was not really an option. We had already put money towards the Rangers. I don't know what the facility was called, but it was for prom. Prom basically didn't happen. So we already had a down payment there. And so we looked at moving it to Globe Life Field Park. I think it's Globe Life Field, sorry. And they were receptive to that. And so we got on their list, but we were one of many school districts that started doing it as well. So we have now set a date for June 23rd at 7:30 p.m., which is a Tuesday night, which is not great, but we will be having an in-person graduation. And it was quite an ordeal and process to try to get to where we were with negotiations and all that, to be able to have an in-person graduation, but having it in a venue that we could support the social distancing that and the requirements for the graduation. So, but I am pretty happy that we made that happen. So,
Are there limits
So-
on? Sorry, go ahead, Julie. Sorry, it was you, Leslie. Sorry.
So what's the deal with the 5 tickets? Because I wasn't really sure about that. Is that us doing that? Is that Globe Life? Is that TEA? Is
That's
that
TEA.
what's the 5 tickets and where is that? Because obviously the others that are doing it Globe Life have lots more people than we do, lots more seniors and people. So I just didn't know where the background of the 5 tickets came
the
from.
5 tickets comes from the commissioner, the rulings that he came out with, and those five tickets, and that's what Globe Life Field is sticking to. And I know there's a lot of talk, and people think that they can get extra tickets from other people who aren't using them. It's 5 tickets per family, and you have to sit as a family. So you only get those 5 tickets, and you can't go sit with somebody else's family. So those are all out of our control. That's not our discretion. That's the commissioner's discretion and what Globe Life Field is adhering to. So did that answer your question?
So will there be a way for anybody who's not family, like friends and other students and stuff? Will there be a place where they can get a ticket and sit?
You're talking about friends. We have staff tickets, but you're talking about, no, I mean, it's family. It's five.
Like
They
if
get
there's-
5 tickets, and they can determine who get those 5 tickets. But we don't sit there and say, no, you get, there's 5 more tickets for your friends over here. We don't, that's not the way that's going to work. So
There's not gonna be like a general part where someone could go, or like, like say you had a freshman who wanted to go watch the seniors graduate. They were on the same team or something.
No.
There's not gonna be any
Not an
extra
option.
spectator.
No, it's 5 per family member, and then our staff. So
Is there going to be any type of broadcast of the
Yes.
event?
we will do a live broadcast also for the people who, we may have families that don't want to attend, but they want to see the graduation. So we have plans for live broadcasting it as well. In fact, we had a media day. Our first meeting with the Rangers was Monday. I sat in an 1.5-hour meeting, virtual meeting with them on Monday. And then yesterday we had a media tour to sit there and look at where to film from and to do the virtual broadcast. And then we got another meeting next Tuesday for kind of a logistics meeting. Okay.
Is the program going to be changed? Is there a limit on time? Got to get in, get out, or is it?
They give you a time limit. We're the only one scheduled. We're the last one, and we're the only one scheduled. So they said they'll work with us, but they want you to try to adhere to about an 1.5-hour, 2-hour timeline. So
So will that change the program that we historically have done? or not?
we're going to try to stay to it as closely as possible. That's one thing we're going to figure out Tuesday when we go out there and do a walkthrough, what we're going to have to cut back, what we can stick with. And as we work out the logistics of it all and kind of see how it's going to operate and facilitate. On Monday, like I said, we sat through the virtual and we looked at the maps and we kind of talked through some things. They showed us what the process is that they're going to do for all the schools that are coming. And, you know, Leslie's right. There are schools that are graduating there that have much bigger, but what they do is they just take it. We'll be in a much more condensed area. What they're going to do with the other ones is just expand them out. Plus they have their big Jumbotron that's going to be out there that it will be shown live. So there won't be a bad seat in the house basically with the Jumbotron, you know, so that we're trying to compensate everything that we can, but the reality is we're not going to, once again, we're not going to make everybody happy. You know, there's always going to be people who want to bring 20 people to graduation, and there's going to be people who bring 2 people to graduation, you know, but the 5 tickets is that's a commissioner's ruling, and that's what Globe Life Field is adhering to. So
Is it generally within the budget what we're going to spend when they're at UTA, or significantly more?
It's not significant, and we also got a contribution from the senior class, their prom contribution. They put it towards the graduation because they didn't get to have prom. So we took that money plus what we were putting at UTA, and it's pretty comparable.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? It's not really an action item.
Any other special things that that have to be considered, mask or anything like that, or?
We are going to put out in speaking with the Rangers, they're not requiring that. They said that's up to us. I don't know that we're going to dictate that. We are going to send out a handout. I think it's going to be more what people are comfortable with, you know, but we will be sending out a packet as we meet with them next week. Then we will be putting together a packet and sending those guidelines out to every student. That's it, so that they know what those guidelines are.
Any other questions on this item? All right, then we'll move on to item C, Tarrant Appraisal District preliminary values.
Okay, I'm gonna let Mr. Adams come around and speak up here. So I'll scoot out of the way.
These are very preliminary numbers. They're running behind at the appraisal district. We're supposed to get a new set of numbers tomorrow. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of where we stood in comparison to prior years.
Anyone have any questions?
How do they determine those values? Because when you look at the chart horizontally, the number of accounts has gone down since 2017. And I know we've had houses pop up, we've had Kroger. Like, is that? I guess I don't understand how those things go down.
Each lot is a parcel or is an account. And even if a house gets built on it, it doesn't change the number.
The value just goes up, but the number is the same. I got you.
And it's their numbers I've looked at it every year and they change every month as I'm getting the reports. And you get the first one and the last one is on the spreadsheet that I built. So.
And the difference between preliminary and actual, what we get in the end of July, it's going to vary greatly, but it's historically always does. And that's one of the things that the preliminary values don't mean a whole lot, you know, in looking at stuff. So,
Well, the biggest issue is going to be it's the properties under protest. The question is how many will still be in protest when we're trying to put our budget together, because I'm assuming they're trying to do the hearings, but they're not getting them done obviously as quickly as they have. So
and that's one of their concerns, and one of the things that they've addressed why everything's going to be pushed back, because they anticipate more protests and taking longer to get that situated. So what else did I leave out?
That's it.
That's it for the TAD.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can move on. Board discussion prior to going back to personnel.
Okay, we will have the, we talked about having a special meeting. I will say that Holly Teague lost her husband, and as a district, we sent flowers and stuff. So he was very ill, and it progressed pretty quickly. And so I'm going to check with her and make sure that she's available for next board meeting in June. We will be also working towards putting together some sort of meeting with our community to look at the values and the belief statements that we have talked about. So, but right now everything's kind of on hold with that. So I was hoping to have that meeting for June, but we're going to be kind of more on her timetable, to see what happens with where she is. So on that. But our next regular board meeting should be the one that's regularly scheduled. Is there any issues with that, or did we stick with that date?
I mean, I think when I looked at it before, it fell right in the middle of SLI. But
Okay.
SLI is not going to happen, so I guess we're okay.
It's all virtual now, so yeah. So, and that was the other thing, which is like B is moving to virtual. I don't know how that's going to work or what that's going to look like, but hopefully you got all the emails from Tracy to get yourselves, set up for it and to do the virtual training for you all. So, but if it's in the middle of that virtual one, do we want to move it or leave it?
I think you can leave it. We just take a break from our meetings and go
Yeah.
back into the sessions if they're going that late at night. I'm not sure they'll be going till 7 p.m. anyway.
I don't think they go that late. So,
Yeah, what I was talking to the lady at TASB today, actually, she said that it sounds like a lot of the sessions are going to be pre-recorded, and then you can go in and watch them and ask questions at certain times. So when the presenters are there, they'll be there at certain times, but you don't have to watch the whole session the whole time. You can watch it on your own time. So there's some wiggle room.
Any other issues from the board as far as board discussion?
When was the, I'm trying to get my notes here. When was the special one that we're gonna ask Holly about?
we were just gonna have it right before the regular board meeting. We usually had it at 6 o'clock. Right
So
before
it's
the
on
board.
that same date? Okay.
Yes.
But
But
we're
I said-
gonna talk to her to see if that's okay. Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
just gonna put a question mark here beside it then.
Yes. So as far as the special one, unless y'all have, I'm just gonna check with her and verify that we're good to do that. If not, then we may postpone it.
Just do it right before the regular meeting again?
Yes. Are y'all, if y'all good with that?
I'm good
Instead
with
of having another special meeting on a different date, just have it right before. So
So
like
we're
it-
looking at the 18th or the 25th.
Or is that, did that give has the committee started working on what the information they've needed with Holly, with everything going on with her?
honestly, we haven't put it together yet. So
Third Thursday is the 18th, so if that's where we're going, that's where we'll be. Anything else on board discussion? All right, then we're gonna go back.
SLI is June 24th
Right,
through the 27th, and the regular meeting was the 18th.
okay, so now we're gonna go back to item 6, which is discussion and consideration of personnel needs of the district. And we may need to go into closed session under 551-071 and 551-074. Do we need it for those first parts as far as hiring our personnel, Mr. G?
unless y'all have questions that you want answered that we want to go closed session on.
So already just go into closed session? Is that the plan? Okay. So then I will declare that we're going to go into closed session. The time I have is 8:16. We'll go into closed session, discuss, consider personnel needs of the district pursuant to Texas Government Code, section 551.071 and 551.074. So we're now leaving for closed session.
Okay, give me just a moment. I will stop the live stream.
Can we go ahead and release Dr. Vu or do we need to keep any of those people?